Okay, hey guys, so this is the third breakdown I've done. I've gotten a lot of people asking to see how this edit was done, which I'm gonna mute because it's very loud. But this is gonna be sort of a breakdown and kind of just like a little thing to kind of explain like how this sort of 10-second edit was done. I edited inside of DaVinci Resolve, obviously, as you can see. Just to keep you updated with like the schedules of how things are gonna go. I'm basically gonna be releasing. I'm taking a little break right now, just for a couple of days. But essentially, it'll be an edit being posted on Fridays and then a tutorial being posted on Mondays. Is like kind of the general structure of how I'll be doing things from now on. And then these long form ones like this, uh, these will be posting probably once every 2 weeks on this YouTube channel, and the rest of it will be on Instagram. So I'll link that down below if you want to follow the Instagram. So this first section, I'm not going to go into sound design right now, so we're just going to go right into this. So this first clip, I like spun the camera a bit here. You can see it kind of spin, and I just speed ramped that movement. So by going here, clicking my retime controls, and then adding a speed point like this, adding a speed point, and I just sped it up to 400 by clicking here and then changing the speed to 400, and that just kind of added that movement. I added a bit of a blur, but we'll go into that afterwards. And then in camera, I swipe to the side, so you can see that swipe to the side. Masked out my grandpa here. What's important here as well is the movement. So I did the transition middle of the way through that motion blur, which gives it that extra kind of sauce that I think is really important to how it works. But here you can see if I break down this frame by frame, I've masked out to do this, just in case you don't know, just real quick, you can skip ahead if you know how to mask out subjects, but I use Magic Mask. You can alternatively use your rotoscoping tools here by just clicking here and then selecting. Make sure that you add an alpha output and then connect this blue dot to this blue square. That'll make it actually have an effect on what's below it. Also, I like to use a bit of soften. You'll see it here. You just soften, use blur radius, or you can soften if you're doing this. Drag the exposure on offset all the way up to max it out, and that'll give you that white out look. And then I basically duplicated these individual frames. I used a 4-framer, which I find works for me. Lowered the opacity of the opening one. Had 2 frames of full transitioned the. I could have done this a little bit smoother, I think, possibly, but I'm pretty happy with it. And then the last frame is very subtle, but it's a normal at 2.29%, so very, very subtle, but you're still getting that kind of that effect in there, I guess you could say. Then kind of coming through, I did this cool effect here where I used a 3D key. So if I go into should be right here. So I used a 3D key by going to here and then clicking on this Rubik's Cube, and then dragging across to create a selection. You'll see here if I drag across, it creates a selection. And I basically selected the highlights here. Again, make sure you add an alpha output, so click add alpha output, and then drag it, and make sure it's on your last node too. You can do this in Fusion, but I prefer to do it in the color page so I have more control over it. Blur radius it a little bit, come in here and I mess around with the exposure a bit. And so what I did, if you watch this frame by frame, it slowly increases, but it's only on the highlights. So it doesn't actually affect the total image, and so it just like slowly brings in this part of the effect, which I think is super, super cool, and it looks really, really good. Okay, moving on. Again, using the rules of motion to kind of help motivate this. So I panned up with the camera. I assume I've done a slight. Oh, sorry. No, I didn't actually speed ramp any of that. So I just panned up and then directly into this shot. Super simple. If you watch this fast, just like that. And that combination of the light transition paired with the movement creates this fluidity that it's just unmatched. So it kind of you're just seeing that bam. And if you watch it come through here, just super fluid. Again, added a blur as well, but I will go over that at the end. And then you can see I did some macros here, pretty simple stuff here, like nothing crazy. Like I just sort of messed around with directional blur. So you can see on this frame, I just put directional blur, and I just fucked around with the way it looks like that. Pretty simple, just to add a bit. I felt as though it needed energy, so I thought, okay, how can I add energy? I can add energy by sort of introducing some motion. So that's what I did. Very subtle. I also zoomed in, so I added 2 frames here, and I just zoomed in. You can see it up here. Just zoomed in slightly. Again, something you won't really notice when you're watching it, but I think it does actually make a difference in the final cut. And then I slowly brought in this section. Again, you can see here I'm also panning up with the camera, so the movement is motivated by the panning of the camera. And then I captured a bunch of low shutter shots. The low shutter shots look like, where is it? It should be somewhere around here. Oh, I might not have it on me right now. But essentially I just captured low shutter shots, which are where you just lower the shutter down to like 1/8, and then you shoot at 12 frames per second. And that's going to give you this kind of like blurry effect. And so if you go frame by frame, I basically just pan the camera upwards to capture it, and that's what this is right here. And so for this one I literally just cropped it slightly. You can see I cropped it. A little trick as well, real quick. If your shit is all messed up and you want to get back to normal, you can, if you press Z on your keyboard, it brings it back to fit the frame, which I think is really, really cool. It's kind of random, but it's cool. So I basically just cropped it on the bottom, you see up here, and then I softened it out. And that, it's very simple, but it works very, very well when you watch it through. Like, you really can't tell. You can see that just like that. And again, like, thinking about energy and motion, when things are fast, they need to be contrasted with stillness, right? But the speed at which an edit happens is what makes it feel impressive, or makes it have that energy about it. So always think, okay, is this too slow or is this too fast? So for example, here, like, this is going super quick, slow it down a little bit. Quick, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow. And so it's all about using slow and fast, using quick elements, fast elements paired with stillness. It really emphasizes that and brings more energy into what you're editing. It's super important. I used a black one framer here just because I thought it helped with the flow. Same thing here. I just panned up with the camera. No speed ramping done at all here. Just panned up. For this transition, it's actually very, very simple. I just used I used darken frame, so you can see it coming in here just like this. I used darken, so if I turn this on and off, it just sort of adds that in like that, which again, really simple, not complicated at all. And then you can see in this frame, I also did darken, and that's just sort of slow, again, darken as well. Just using darken and again, do this kind of like as you see fit, but when it happens really quickly, it just looks like it's being moved into the other frame, just like that, which I think it's super fluid. So that's about 5 frames there. But you just slowly going in here and just lowering the darken. You see it happening 23 down to 15, and it goes away. And it's just super, super easy. Okay, and then here, this is again, so people always ask about how to do these whip transitions. It's really not that complicated. So what you're doing is you're just basically going to use a speed ramp. So again, come in here, Command R. So I just added a speed ramp, and then come into your keyframe options here, drag this up, and you can smooth out some of these movements. I've actually found that I prefer to not speed up my speed. Like, I prefer not to smooth out my my speed ramps. I find that it actually works really well when you don't, because I like the energy of it being whipped quickly rather than it being slowly run in. But again, that's personal preference, so you need to figure that out for yourself. But here, as you can see, like, there's that whip, and because we're using motion blur on motion blur, when you go frame by frame, you can kind of see it, sort of, but it's just so fluid. And I'm also using additional directional blur frames up here, so I've added in 3 adjustment clips. Again, super simple stuff. This is not complicated. Like, what I'm doing, it's all about just putting time into learning it. And so the effects using directional blur, and then progressively sort of increasing and then decreasing the directional blur just to further increase that, like, fluidity. Additionally, you can use darken, so you can crop this frame here, drag this frame. Why is that being annoying? Whoa, why is it doing that? Sorry, there's something going wrong with the... I don't know why that was doing that. But you can basically go in here and you can click darken. And then that increases, like, if I play that, it's probably incredible. Just has to quickly render out. But yeah, you can see that, like, just insane. So fluid. So fluid. Now, what's interesting about this actually is the reason this is really interesting is because the motions are actually going against each other. So typically you'll want to follow the motion, but with this one I actually chose to sort of go against it. So this motion is moving from left to right, and I actually transitioned it with a right to left movement. And that gives it that really interesting kind of, it's I don't know, I just really like the way it looks. Just like that, super interesting. Again, play around with this in camera in your edits, like mess around with it. I think it's a super cool effect. It looks really good. Okay, moving on. Sorry, I just have to quickly render cache all this. So this transition, I like to use the camera and what I do with the camera in my edits more than other people, and I think it's become a bit of a style thing, I guess, over the last few weeks, but I think like it's something I like to do. And so what I did is I added another speed point by clicking here and then adding speed point, change it to 400, and you'll see naturally the camera shakes because I think I was just transitioning to another clip, or I purposely did it, I don't remember. But you can see that movement, right? And what this does is it sort of masks the section coming in after. So if you watch this quickly, bam, you see that? So that movement is super subtle, but it's not super complicated. Again, super simple. This is the exact same thing I did previously in the other transition with the 3D keying. So I 3D keyed, if you see frame by frame, I 3D keyed out this section of the passport using that exact same thing I mentioned before by going in here and then going into my settings here, going 3D key, hitting the plus button and dragging the plus over this, and then I dragged the exposure all the way up on my global. And what that does, and then obviously added an alpha output and connected it so that it comes through, just like I mentioned before. But you can see it slowly comes in. So this is sort of like, it's just an add transition, but it's a bit more purposeful, which I think is cool. I could, if I were to do this a little bit better, I would probably drag this out, and then I would lower the add a little bit more, just like this. But you know, you're kind of getting that transition just like that, which is, I think, super cool. So you can see that, bam. But it's all about, always think about how you can lead things into another, because the whole reason we edit, especially with this style, is we're trying to think about how we can connect pieces of information together and connect videos together, right? So a great way to connect videos together, and this is done with audio in films, you know, with J-cuts, and like, so you're sort of introducing an element from the preceding video earlier. So here I'm introducing that element before the rest of the video comes in, and that's the fluidity about it, right? And that's what makes something fun to look at, and it provides information and makes it just more interesting than looking at a simple cut. Like, I could simply have just removed this and just cut this video right here, but it wouldn't have that flash, right? That interesting. It's interesting to look at. Here I use the natural motion of the camera by sort of, you'll see the hand moves down towards the left, and I used another clip where I was panning up to the right. So kind of, again, talking about those like contradicting movements. It's something I've been playing around with a lot, and I think it's interesting and it works really well. So that motion is moving to the left, so I take something to the right. And so I just connected those two together, and bam, just like that. Now, the thing that makes this transition is an adjustment clip that I use Fusion in. So what you're going to want to do, I'm going to go over you'll see all these adjustment clips. These are all done in Fusion, but I'll explain how that works in a second. However, with this, so we're going to go open in Fusion. Now, don't worry, this is going to be totally fine. I understand Fusion is scary. It is scary. But what I did is so you go shift space, and that's going to basically bring up the select tool menu, and then you're going to search up brightness contrast. Once you've searched up brightness contrast, you're just going to double click on it, and it'll put it into here. Once you have it in here connected up, you're going to go into your gain slider. Now you can see I've added keyframes here, so I brought my gain down. You click this button up here to create a keyframe. So I drag my gain down at this middle point where I want the transition to happen. I go to the end of my clip, I add another keyframe, drag the gain back up to 1, and then I go to the beginning of my clip, add a keyframe by clicking on this button, and bring the gain up to 1 again. And what this is going to do is it's going to create this thing where if you go frame by frame, it's going to go from light to dark. And that's going to mask any sort of artifacts that transition would have, or any type of like any lack of fluidity. That's going to mask that out and make it super smooth. I also came in here. Oh, I actually didn't interesting. I didn't smooth it out. Oh, I did smooth it out. So when you come in here, to open up your spline menu, you're going to click this button up here. It's going to open up your splines. Click this button here, and what this will do is, if you see if I like mess this up, it'll bring it all into this small area. What you're going to do is you're going to go Command A, or you can just simply drag over this. You're going to press S on your keyboard, which is going to smooth out all these splines. You can then adjust the splines by dragging these pieces here. I prefer to just have a pretty fluid curve, so just a normal curve. You can do different types of curves for different things, but for this one, this worked well. Okay, moving back into the edit. So that's, again, a really easy transition. It looks super nice when it's moving quick, right? So boom, boom, and just nice. And it's amazing, right, how quick that kind of, you don't even notice it because it's so fast. It's only 1, 2, 3, it's what, like 12 frames, 13 frames, something like that. And so it just works. Again, I took a problem I had, which was it wasn't working, and I figured out a way to fix that, right? And the way that was to darken it like that. I think it worked super well. Okay, moving on to the next part of these transitions. So I'm not going to go in detail about this. It's not terribly complicated. What I did is I basically just masked out. I masked out the character, which was my little brother. Oh, I shoot all my my little brother. It's like he's like gotta be the muse at this point. But I basically just masked it out, and you can see here if I drag this up so we have a bit more to see, and then drag this down, you can see that I kind of have this base clip and then these two on top. These two are just the added in pieces like that. And so it's literally just a mask. You can do this with rotoscoping or with Magic Mask. I would definitely use Magic Mask, which is a studio feature. It's much easier. But essentially that's what it is. Like that's all it is. Very simple. Just pulling it out and then dragging it back in as the transition happens. So you can see I've also added in some additional things. So what this is here is this is a directional blur that I keyframed. So you can see here I keyframed that movement up in this area. Again, click these buttons to create the keyframes. Went to my middle point and I had it at max, which I wanted at 0.488, and then a 180 degree blur angle. And then I did the exact same thing here and just duplicated it. And that just gives it that extra, that emphasized the impact of when it pops out and then back again like that. Super simple. Super simple. And then the transition here, again using, where's that transition? Here we go. So this transition was honestly just like so fluid that I didn't really have to do anything. A lot of the times if you're shooting, make sure that when you're filming you're shooting at 1/50 and 24 frames per second. 1/50 on the shutter speed, which is going to give you that kind of that motion blur, which is super important when you're doing this type of stuff. But I really didn't have to do a lot here. It was like super simple, just kind of took the two transitions and it really worked quite well. And on this one I was actually matching the motion, so you can see this motion goes from right to the left, and then this motion comes from right to left. So there are certain times where it works, certain times where it doesn't. It's all about just figuring out what feels better in the moment. It's always going to be different. It's all about how something feels. And then here, same exact thing. I love using the 3D mask, the 3D keyer, sorry. So what I did is I just 3D keyed. I'm not going to go into it again because I've already kind of explained it. But essentially just I 3D keyed out this section, brought the exposure up, and then I sort of messed around with some colors. You can actually see it here. I don't know if anyone even noticed this in the edit, but I changed the colors of some of these using the 3D key, which I think is a cool little Easter egg, and I thought it was interesting. Like when you watch it through, it kind of like it does have a bit of an effect on you for sure. Again, like play around with how this feels with the music. Like I was purposefully adding in these flickers when it was motivated by the music, so make sure that is the case. An additional thing I added here, which I think is a nice touch, and it's something I've been messing around with a bit recently, is zoom blurs. So what zoom blur does is, and zoom blurs you can find up in here if you just search, you go into your this panel here and you can look up zoom blur like this. Oh, I can't spell. I'm pretty sure you can. Why is zoom blur not? That's weird. Hold up. Why is oh, sorry. Oh, it is called zoom blur. Okay, I was in the wrong area. Anyways, so you take your zoom blur, you can drag it onto this clip just like that, and this is an adjustment clip again. But what I did is I basically just masked. I think I just keyframed, yeah. So I keyframed the zoom blur to move from 0. You can see it up here. Again, I'm not going to go over that, but it's pretty simple. Zoom keyframed it up to go up to about 3 point, what was it, at 4.0, and then back down. And what zoom blur does, if you look at the edges here, you can see it's kind of affecting, if I turn this one on and off, you can see it's affecting the edges, just like that, which I really, really love the way it looks. It really draws, I really was thinking, okay, like, I want to draw the eye towards the center in this section of the edit, because it was important that, like, for the story, I guess it's not really a story, but the idea that we were traveling from the US to New Zealand, and I wanted to, like, emphasize that. And also it makes the composition feel a lot more directed and purposeful when you add this type of thing in. But yeah, just like a subtle kind of move. I also zoomed in slightly, but we'll go into that later. But yeah, I think it's cool. I'm really proud of it. So I think that's a cool additional thing to add to thinking about zoom blur. I also use zoom blur in this section. I like to use zoom blur when I actually zoom in post, because it kind of gives the effect that you're zooming in. If you watch the edges here, you'll see the edges kind of fade out. I think it's an interesting sort of, it's cool. I think it looks really good, and it's very simple. You know, people like to use turbulent displays and all these different things, but I think those type of things look really, really great, and it's a lot easier too, and a lot less demanding for a computer. My computer is not super, super good, so I do need to find ways to not be using really demanding stuff. So, and that's one way I use less demanding things. Here, I added in some additional directional blur frames, which you can see here, directional blur frames. I also, this transition wasn't feeling super fluid to me, so I added in some darken frames. This is like basically how I work. You're definitely, I'm sure you can notice kind of like the ways I do my things. It's pretty repetitive, for sure. But I mean, it works. Like it's simple, but it works. I think it's probably the way to think about it. But again, just darken slowly. I honestly could have done that a lot better than I did. But yeah, maybe bringing that. I would have probably brought that up a little bit more if I was doing it again. But anyways, doesn't really matter. Use the left to right movement into a right to left movement. Yeah, left to right into a. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's another opposing movement. Well, kind of. Not really. It's sort of the same movement. Each one's moving from right to left. Well, wait. Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm an idiot. They're both moving from right to left. But again, super fluid there. Simple. That darken frame just adds in, and then the motion blur masks that out even further. I believe I did some speed ramping here, just change it to 200%. And that was pretty straightforward. Okay, moving on. This transition, I'm not going to go over it. It's the exact same thing. Just took basically two pieces of movement, made it fast like that. This is I'm actually very proud of this transition. It's very fluid. But again, like just using those, again, you can just copy and paste these directional blur frames. And so I just added those directional blur frames in, and just super simple, super fluid, super easy. It worked in my favor that these matched up. If you watch, like, it kind of matches itself up in a weird way, those poles. So, well, a leg and a pole, but it made that incredibly fluid. And then again, speed around here a little bit, just have Wyatt chill, and did a quick little zoom. I'm not going to go into detail about this stuff. I mean, this is just sort of random shit. I used some darken frames here to just transition another version of Wyatt in here, transition them out. And then, okay, now this does get a bit more complicated here. So this transition I'm really, really happy with, actually. It turned out really, really good. What this transition is it's an add transition, so a pretty simple one. Same exact thing I did with my grandpa in that first section, but basically took that sort of mask, which you can rotoscope it or magic mask it, depending on if you have the expensive version or the free version. But then I basically took add at 16%, added 100%, 2 frames of this add frame, and then one a bit lower, and then that transitions out from that. Pretty simple, not super complicated, but really, like, incredibly clean. Like, this just looks really good. Again, thinking about, like, how we can transition between our clips. Like, if you have something still and still, how can you make that dynamic? And I think that makes it dynamic, so pretty happy with that. Looks really good. This transition is a little bit complicated. If you go frame by frame, this is what it looks like. So essentially what it is it's like I've taken cut slices, so I went in here and I cropped If you go into the cropping menu, you can see I've just cropped out different sections and then softened them out. So this has been softened quite a bit, and then this one I didn't soften. And so if you just go frame, and then I took an additional thing here and then I added, I think this is the add frame. Yeah. So this is a section that's been cut out and put beneath, which is where you're getting that add, which is helping that transition. And I think I assume I've also brought it down a little bit. If I go into the, yeah. So add and then normal, but kind of like, I think I just brought the exposure up a bit and then opacity brought back down a little bit, and it just transitions out like that. The reason it gets that weird waviness is because these clips are unaffected by a zoom, but in this section of the clip, you'll see it here, but if you look up here in this section, I actually added a slight zoom, so you can see it zoom in. And so what's happening is, and what gives it that waviness is that kind of the idea that this zoom is actually, obviously you can see it's out of line with what's happening around it, which makes it really interesting to look at. So thinking about like how I can transition that zoom into a bit of a tighter, because the whole point of this was I was like, hey, I need something, this is a bit of a longer section, so I need something coming in that's going to kind of make that, I need something coming in that's going to kind of introduce a bit more like visual interest, right? Because it felt like it was slowing down there when I need to keep the energy. So I just did a cut and it just zooms in. You can see here, it's so fluid that you can't really tell, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, that's again, like, not complicated, looks really good. And then here, super simple, took some sort of low shutter. I literally just whipped the camera from left to right here on low shutter. Added in an add frame here at 100%. I added in this adjustment clip. I mean, I can open it up and show you, but this is an adjustment clip that just has a color corrector, and then the saturation is brought all the way down to 0. You can see it just affects the saturation. And so whenever I put that in, it just basically takes the saturation out. I thought it was an interesting transition because it kind of like, it just added some more interest into it. But again, like, super fucking fluid. I'm very happy with that transition. And then additionally, again, I've added in a zoom blur. This is a bit more an aggressive zoom blur. If you look at the edges, you can see the edges get a bit warped as it gets closer, which obviously is purposeful. But that really does help to kind of like sell the effect. And again, like, I think a really important part of editing is providing context. It's like when you wind up for a punch, right? I think thinking about editing in that way is super important. So, for example, with this, if that transition were to just happen out of nowhere, it would feel very jarring, right? But because I add this really subtle zoom, this zoom blur on the edges, it almost signals to the audience, okay, something's about to happen. And so I think that's super important. And you can see it in basically all the transitions in this. In these ones, there's there's this little flicker here, which sort of initiates that transition. And then here, same exact thing. This is initiated by this sort of subtle, where is it? This subtle zoom is what's initiating that next transition. So just thinking about that wind up for the punch, like the wind up is the thing that's leading your eye in, and the punch is that transition. So keep an eye on that type of thing and think about that when you're editing. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I'm going to quickly go over the, you can see all these things, so I'll quickly explain that, but I just want to keep this pretty short because I don't want to overwhelm you. So how I do I do shakes. So you can see there's obviously some you can see the shake. Shakes are super important. What a shake is doing is, if you don't know, is it's basically just, you're able to have control over how the image is shaking, which gives energy and gives movement, and sort of, it emphasizes transitions, which I think is like one of the most important parts of editing. So you can see here, how I like to do it is first off, always name your transitions. I didn't used to do this, and it's a real lifesaver to have these named and colored. So if you go into this file section here, you can basically select a color and then name the file. Like I can name it, yeah, and it can change it down here. Obviously you don't need to name it, but that, yeah, name your stuff. But anyways, so once you've selected the duration, I usually like to do my durations at like 12 frames to like 15 frames. That's roughly like, I don't really know how that works. My math brain is not there right now, but it doesn't really matter. Anyways, So what you're gonna do is you're gonna right click on your adjustment clip. If you want to find an adjustment clip, I assume you know this, but you just look up in here and it's in your effects panel. Drag it into the thing and then change the duration. Click open in Fusion page. Again, don't worry, this is not complicated. It's very, very simple. So you're gonna then go. You're gonna make sure you're selecting the media in one. You won't have this camera shake here. You'll just have this media in and media out. Go Shift Space, and then you're gonna search up camera shake. Now the big thing is make sure you do not pick this camera shake. Pick the camera shake with a C shook. This camera shake doesn't have as much variety, and you're not able to control the variables as much. At least I'm pretty sure. Let me just double check that for you, just so I'm not telling you fake things. Yes. So use the one that looks like this. Do not use this camera shake unless you want a simpler. It's much simpler, but this one allows you to have a lot more control over it. Anyways, so then you're going to go into your camera shake. How these adjustment clips work in Fusion is anything that's placed beneath these adjustment clips is going to be affected by what you do in this Fusion panel. Super, super useful. It means you can basically engineer and create your own effects. And they can be also copy and pasted, which I'm sure you understand would make everything a lot easier. So what you're going to want to do is you're mainly going to only be messing around with your X deviation, your Y deviation, and your overall strength. Make sure this is set at sine. I think at a base level it should be set at sine anyways. What you're going to want to do is we're going to be making a Y shake here. If you want to make an X shake, which X shake is obviously going left to right, and then a Y shake is going up and down. Now the reason we make X shakes and Y shakes separately is because when you have movement from left to right, you only want to be using Y deviation shakes, and when you have movement up and down, you want to only be using X deviation. You don't want your shake to be moving in the direction of where the motion is going. So that's why I make X and Y shakes, and I also make an X and Y shake. So I'll have basically 3 different shakes. My X shake, my Y shake, and then a combination shake. And that combination shake can be moved. For example, I used the combination shake when I was doing this transition right here. Where is it? When I was doing this transition right here, I used the X and Y shake because I wanted to emphasize that kind of energy of that happening. You can actually see it there where it's going a bit aggressive like that. Anyways, back into the Y shake. So then you're gonna go open the Fusion page. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna drag your X deviation down and keep your Y deviation around about 0.2. Again, if you want to mess around with that, you can. It's personal preference. Sometimes people like more shake, less shake. I like to leave it at 0.2. Then you're only gonna mess around with your overall strength. You're gonna find your middle point, create a keyframe, drag it up to 1. Go to your end, create a keyframe, drag it down to 0. Go to your start, create a keyframe, drag it down to 0. What this is going to do is it's going to create 3 points where your shake can move up and down. Now, the most important step, your shake will not look good if you don't fix your splines. So click on your spline editor up in here. I recommend you just keep your spline editor open like the entire time, just because it's super important and it's always used. You're going to click on this right here, which is going to open this. And then you're going to click this zoom to fit button. I've already obviously smoothed these keyframes out, but your keyframes will look something like they'll look very stiff. They'll look like this. Whoa, not like that. They'll look like this. So what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna go Command A, then you're gonna press S on your keyboard, and that's gonna do this. Once you have this, you can grab these splines and you can mess around with how they work. I'm going to go back to how I did my original one. I prefer to have on my shakes, I like to tighten up the top a little bit, which is going to make it be a little bit more aggressive, and then I smooth out these a tiny bit by just dragging them out. The more you drag them out, so if you think about it's self-explanatory if you've done math, which I hope you have, but essentially like anything moving upwards is going to be aggressive movement. So this is slow because the parabola is it the parabola? I haven't taken math in a while. Anyways, basically the spline in this shape is a lot more mellow, so it's going to go slow, and then when it comes here, it's going to start moving fast and then slow down. Now what this gives you, if you look here, is it's just giving a shake. So you can actually see it shake, but that is super important for creating movement. Like if I remove this and play this, it just doesn't have like it still looks good. Like it's cool. It looks good. But when I add in this Y shake, you'll see, just let it render cache for a second. super different. It looks great. And that's pretty much it. I also use some additional pieces up here. There are also some other, you can see this, I've just, so, and the cool thing is about this is you can just copy and paste it. Like, you can literally take these shakes and just copy and paste it. By holding down Option and just dragging, you can just duplicate it, or you can literally just Command C, Command V. And you have basically an effect you've created yourself, which is, I think, is super cool. And it's very useful because you can really, you can adjust that yourself, which is great. Okay. Then moving on to the last step, which is pretty self-explanatory. For this I just crop, so you can see I've just this is just to allow me to have a barrier, because I shoot in like 2.4 something to 1, but just don't do that. Just shoot in 16 by 9. But I just have to crop. That's not important. Anyways, that was confusing as fuck. I'm sorry. So here with the movement, this is basically a section where I'll do any zooms or any type of movement in camera. So you can see if I open up my Spline editor, just like this, and I click on my transform, you can see these are all the keyframes of me zooming in and out. So here I did a zoom, which you can see right here. This is a little zoom. And then here I zoomed in again, which you can see here. So there's that zoom in. And again, this is just down to personal preference. Like, you just have to figure out, what you like and what you don't like, and that you'll work that out yourself. But that's what that is for. I also add a global shake, which is just, I just grab the camera shake here. Not the fusion transition. The where is it? The effects, or is it resolve effects? There we go. The camera shake film emulation. So just drag that onto here, and what that's doing is it's adding a really subtle shake to the just kind of takes away that roboticness of what videos can often feel like, and it just gives it a bit more energy, as you can see, which I think it's definitely worth putting in there. That's super simple. And then this is the big thing now. This is super important. I go over this in all my videos, but I'm just gonna go over it one more time. So what you do is you're gonna create an adjustment clip that runs across your entire edit, so over the entire thing. You're gonna go into your Fusion page, open in Fusion page, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna go Shift plus, and you're gonna search up lens blur. It's what I prefer to use for my blurs. People buy plugins for this type of thing. But I really like the lens blur. I think if you just mess around with the settings, it can look really, really good. And it's, you don't have to buy an extra plugin. But essentially what you're going to do is you're just going to mess around with these settings here, and then you're going to only mess around with your blur size, obviously going down from 0 up to whatever you want to go up to. And again, use this as you see fit, but if you can see, all these points here are points where I've dragged up or down the blur. And what this does is it's basically going to it's going to hide those transitions even more and make everything feel super fluid. So pretty much at all the key points of transition, you can see it here. Like, for example, right here, if you watch the keyframes over here, I've just set keyframes where I want the blur to kind of increase, and then where I want it to decrease again. And you can see it happens at all the major. If I ever want to hide something, like I'm not super proud of a transition, or I don't have the time, or it could be more fluid, adding a blur will always help. Make sure your blurs are done quickly, so they're brought up and down quite fast, because you don't want it. The human brain cannot comprehend that movement of a blur. So if it comes in quickly and leaves quickly, it's going to be totally good. But yeah, just play around with that. Like, for example, just for a specific example, on these transitions here, like especially on this one right here, you can see I've added in a bunch of blur. So I had it kind of really spike. So if you look at the keyframes over here, when I had this transition happen, I brought it really high up and then back down. And what this does, it just adds an extra kind of makes it more fluid, makes it more seamless, and just really highlights, I think, increases the quality of the edit. Again, don't do this just because I've done it. Think about why it's needed and if it's needed. There's a very large portion here where I didn't add blurs because I just didn't need it. You don't need, if a transition is smooth enough, you don't need to add a blur. Only add blurs if it's actually gonna, if it's needed and necessary. You can copy the settings if you want here, but I basically it's pretty much left everything at root. I like to bring the blade curvature all the way up, because I don't like if I show you I can show you the blur curvature all the way up, but it's all the way down, sorry. It just kind of adds in, it makes it look like a lens, which I don't like. I just like to be a bit softer and not have artifacts. not artifacts, just have like that curvature. Anyways, I hope that helped. I'm sorry if that was a mess. I don't really plan these tutorials on this channel because I just put them up to help people. I hope you learned something, and if you have any other questions, drop them in the comments, or flick me a DM on my Instagram at jcksn.brela, and I will try and respond. I'll also link that Instagram down in the bio, so if you want to follow along on that account, go for it. We're trying to get 10K followers in the next month, so that would be amazing. But yeah, I hope this helped. Hope you learned something. Follow this account for more of these breakdowns, and follow me on Instagram. All right, cool, easy.